You've read the Bible, or at least you think you have, but there's a version that exists between the verses your church highlights with yellow marker. A version where gathering sticks on the wrong day meant death by stoning, where mocking a prophet got 42 children torn apart by wild bears, where lying about a donation made you drop dead on the spot. These aren't interpretations. They're direct quotes. Written in the same book that promises salvation, there are execution orders that would horrify any modern reader. Here's what the Sunday sermon always leaves out: the brutal, bloody, unfiltered truth. Let's start with the punishment everyone has at least heard of: stoning. But here's what they don't mention in Bible study. It wasn't reserved for murderers or rapists. The death penalty applied to offenses that wouldn't even warrant community service today. Adultery meant death. Leviticus 20:10 is explicit. Both the man and the woman caught in the act were to be executed. No trial by jury, no appeals process. The community gathered, picked up rocks, and threw them until the bodies stopped moving. This wasn't a suggestion or a metaphor about spiritual consequences. It was law. Blasphemy carried the same sentence. Leviticus 24 tells the story of a man who cursed God's name during a fight. Moses asked the Lord what to do. The answer came back clear: take him outside the camp, have everyone who heard him place their hands on his head, then let the entire congregation stone him to death. They did exactly that. But here's where it gets stranger. In Numbers 15, the Israelites found a man gathering sticks on the Sabbath. Firewood. That was his crime. They brought him to Moses, unsure what to do. God's response was immediate: the man must die. The whole assembly took him outside the camp and stoned him with stones until he was dead, for picking up sticks on the wrong day of the week. Now the punishments start hitting closer to home. Deuteronomy 21 describes what parents could do with a rebellious son. Not a murderer, not a thief, just a stubborn kid who wouldn't listen and liked to drink too much. The text says the mother and father could bring him to the elders at the city gate. They would declare him rebellious and disobedient. Then all the men of the town would stone him to death. The passage ends with a chilling phrase: you must purge the evil from among you. All Israel will hear and be afraid. Picture that. Parents handing over their own child, watching their neighbors pick up rocks, hearing the sounds that followed. This was considered righteous. Burning alive was reserved for specific crimes. Leviticus 21:9 names one. If a priest's daughter defiled herself by becoming a prostitute, she was to be burned with fire. Not stoned, burned. The text offers no further explanation. No age limit, no consideration of circumstances, just fire. But individual punishments weren't enough in some cases. Sometimes entire families paid for one person's mistake. Joshua chapter 7 tells the story of Achan. After the battle of Jericho, God commanded the Israelites not to take any plunder for themselves. Everything was to be devoted to the Lord. Achan disobeyed. He took a beautiful robe from Babylon, 200 shekels of silver, and a bar of gold. He hid them under his tent. The next battle went badly. 36 Israelites died. Joshua tore his clothes and fell face down before the ark, asking God what went wrong. God answered, Israel has sinned. They have taken devoted things. They have stolen and lied and put the items among their own possessions. That is why they cannot stand against their enemies. Through a process of elimination by tribe and clan, Achan was identified. He confessed everything. But confession didn't save him. Joshua took Achan, the silver, the robe, the gold bar, his sons, his daughters, his cattle, his donkeys, his sheep, his tent, and everything he owned to the valley of Achor. All Israel stoned them with stones. Then they burned them with fire and piled rocks over the remains. Read that list again. His sons, his daughters, children who had nothing to do with their father's decision to pocket some silver and a robe. They died screaming alongside him because collective punishment was built into the system. The text says, God's fierce anger turned away after that. The place was named the Valley of Achor, meaning trouble, and it stayed that way. These weren't isolated incidents or extreme interpretations by overzealous priests. This was the law, written clearly, executed literally. And churches today flip past these chapters like they were never there. Human punishment was brutal enough, but when God handled things directly, the body counts climbed even higher. 2 Samuel chapter 6 tells one of the strangest stories in the entire Bible. The Israelites were transporting the Ark of the Covenant on an ox cart. The oxen stumbled. A man named Uzzah reached out his hand to steady the ark so it wouldn't fall. The moment he touched it, God struck him dead on the spot. That's it. That's the whole crime. He tried to keep the sacred object from hitting the ground. His reward was instant death. The text says David was angry and afraid that day. He left the ark at a nearby house for 3 months because he didn't know what else to do. Then there's 2 Kings chapter 2. The prophet Elisha was walking to Bethel when a group of boys came out of the town and mocked him. They called him Baldy. "Go on up, you bald head," they shouted. Elisha turned around, looked at them, and called down a curse in the name of the Lord. 2 female bears came out of the woods and mauled 42 of the boys. 42 children, torn apart by wild animals, for making fun of a bald man. The text moves on to the next story without comment. Some people think these punishments were limited to the Old Testament, that the New Testament brought a gentler God. Acts chapter 5 says otherwise. A man named Ananias and his wife Sapphira sold a piece of property. They kept part of the money for themselves, but claimed they were giving the full amount to the apostles. Peter confronted Ananias. "You have not lied to men, but to God." Ananias heard these words and fell down dead. Young men wrapped up his body and carried him out. 3 hours later, Sapphira arrived, not knowing what had happened. Peter asked her if she sold the land for the amount her husband claimed. She said yes. Peter told her the feet of those who buried her husband were at the door, and they would carry her out too. She dropped dead at his feet. Same crime, same punishment, same day. The plagues of Egypt killed thousands. The wilderness wanderings saw entire groups swallowed by the earth, burned by fire from heaven, and bitten by venomous snakes. Numbers 25 records that 24,000 Israelites died in a single plague after some of them slept with Moabite women and worshipped their gods. These numbers are staggering, and they appear in the same book that promises God is slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love. So why don't churches teach this? The answer is uncomfortable. These passages don't fit the narrative. They complicate the message. A God who commands parents to stone their children, who sends bears to maul teenagers, who strikes dead a man for trying to prevent the ark from falling, doesn't sell well on Sunday morning. Pastors choose the verses that inspire, the ones about grace, redemption, and second chances. They skip Deuteronomy 21 and Joshua 7. They never mention Uzzah or the 42 boys. The assumption is that congregations can't handle the full picture, or perhaps the preachers themselves prefer not to dwell on it. But here's what that selective reading creates. Millions of people think they know what's in the Bible when they've only heard the highlight reel. The brutal, bloody, unflinching sections get buried under centuries of comfortable interpretation. The truth is simpler and harder to accept. The Bible contains detailed instructions for execution by stoning, burning, and divine intervention. It describes children killed for their parents' sins and teenagers torn apart for mockery. It records a God who demanded blood for offenses that wouldn't merit a footnote in modern law. None of this is hidden. It's right there in the verses. Anyone can read it. The leather-bound book on nightstands and church pews across the world contains passages that would be banned from television for graphic violence. Churches just learned a long time ago which pages to skip, and most people never thought to ask what they were missing.